It will still turn out to be most likely a gauntlet, although it's not been quite that for the Buckeyes through 2 games of the college football playoff. Appreciate you stopping by here for Ohio State Buckeyes Live special edition so we can get our guys off to Dallas to cover, of course, the Cotton Bowl and the big matchup against Texas in the semifinal. Steve Hellwagon right next to me, Bucknuts247 Sports. Leave those comments and questions in the chat. We appreciate your contributions. Keeps us going here at the Voice of College Football. We hope you appreciate the time that Steve, typically Tony, give us on a regular basis, breaking down the Buckeyes. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, doing good. It's game week again. This season will not end. It continued on with that huge win, excuse me, in the Rose Bowl last Wednesday. And the Buckeyes just came out and did what they basically did against Tennessee, and that was just steamroll them, both sides of the football, and jumped on 34-0. The game was over middle of the second quarter, and that was the number 1 team in the country they did that to. And now next up is Texas, and we'll see what the Buckeyes have in store next for the Longhorns.
At least my response to it was surprise, just like most, in terms of just mounting the points. And once it got to 31-0, just staring at that scoreboard thinking, this game is 31-0. This was supposed to be the game of the year, just the 2 best football teams out there right now going at it. Who knows what's going to happen? It's undoubtedly going to come down to the last play of the game. Just all those forecasts from everyone. And I was no different than anyone else thinking, wow, this is going to be another classic, at least as good as what we saw at Autzen Stadium. But man, the Buckeyes. But now that it's settled in a little bit, Steve, it came more to me that now I don't think that the separation between the 2 teams would be like this if they played 10 times on the average occasion. But no, this is what this team is capable of, and this is how good this team can be.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you think about it, and they went out, to California, and here's Oregon, the number 1 team in the country, and they went in there and really just again, they were completely motivated, obviously, from the first matchup that was played in Oregon. Didn't feel like they played well enough out there, particularly defensively. So those guys were really motivated and tuned up to stop Oregon, and that's what they did. I mean, they had no sacks in the first meeting, 8 sacks in the second meeting, and then offensively, Will Howard, he took it personally. Some of the comments that were made, about how he cost him the game at the end by not sliding in time and taking that sack on the last drive and different things. And he came out and played arguably his best game. He was on point. They were hitting the big plays early, and they just kind of overwhelmed Oregon really before they knew what hit them. So to me, you look at it, and it was a command performance by Ohio State, and only the 6th time that they've ever beaten the number 1 team, and couldn't have come at a better time, obviously, in the playoff.
Now we'll bring in our Texas guest here in just a second because much of the analysis of the Oregon game will obviously make its way on into this Texas preview in the anticipation of this game. But the last thing I'll ask you, Steve, because before we get to the Texas part of the conversation, is just the different feel. You've been to the Rose Bowl a number of times. You've been to a major bowl game with this Ohio State program a zillion times. I was running the numbers, Ohio State versus Texas, over different time frames. And the number of major bowl games that Ohio State has appeared in is just really mind-boggling over the last 25 to 30 years. So you've been in this situation, but it's usually the culmination of a season. Then we got to the 4-team playoff, and it was that experience that, oh, you won a Sugar Bowl, but that's not the end. Oh, you got another one to play. And now it's just another layer. It just seems like this thing's going on forever. It's like the NFL playoffs. And for as euphoric as that was, well, they got to take on the next step.
Yeah, you can't get too excited about patting yourself on the back for playing almost a perfect game against Oregon because, guess what? You still have to win 2 more games. And I was joking with Chip Kelly, the offensive coordinator, on the field after the game. I said, was that a masterpiece in play calling? And I think it was. I mean, to run the first play to G. Scott down the sideline for 30 yards, then just kind of a little flip pass out in the flat to the motion man, and he makes the defenders miss, and he's gone for a touchdown. The second touchdown, Jeremiah Smith, nobody's even in the same area code as him. They ran the ball finally after setting up the run, and Henderson rips off a 66-yard touchdown run. And they made it look simple. And yet, as Chip Kelly said, he mistakenly first said, we still got one more to go. And then he caught himself and said, no, we got two more to go. So, yeah, nobody's ever going to be playing football this deep into January. January 20th will be the last game. The next game's on January the 10th. So, these challenges just keep hurtling at you at the speed of light. And Texas is next up for Ohio State on the one side, Notre Dame and Penn State on the other. And whatever the matchup is for the championship, you've got two blue blood programs that'll be there.
Folks, I just posted a video. It's on the main channel, and I actually broke down these two programs on everything that you're going to find on Winsipedia all time. However, I took it a few further steps. I went and did the breakdowns in all those categories post-1970, post-2000, and during the college football playoff era. Interesting comparison between Ohio State and Texas all time. That video just posted over on the main channel. All right, let's move on to Texas. We got Gerald Goodrich here, does an outstanding job with Matthew Miller as co-hosting the Texas Live show right here at the Voice of College Football every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 Central, where it counts there in Texas. Gerald, how you doing?
Man, I'm great. I'm doing well. I'm making sure my bourbon budget is good for the Saturday, but outside of that, I think we're doing great.
Nice. Well, Ohio State put on what Steve termed as a command performance, and that was pretty obvious. The Texas performance, biggest favorite of the weekend, closest game of the weekend. I was mighty impressed with Arizona State. Texas comes out with the dagger right out of the gate. Boom. Pass, touchdown, Golden, and he was phenomenal all day. And then the big punt return, of course, from Silas Bolden. It looked like, this will be what we expected it to be. Then the offense bogged down. I did all sorts of numbers calculations, like 42 minutes of game time without a touchdown, just had the one field goal drive. And Arizona State looked like the better team in the second half. What's your evaluation of the Longhorns coming into this one?
Yeah, I think there's two different avenues to look at it. I think one, Arizona State came in with the right game plan, right? They wanted to keep the Texas offense off the field as long as they can. And if you look at the time of possession difference, especially in that third quarter, I think it was something like 12-3 in favor of Arizona State. And so by the time the fourth quarter comes around and it's winning time, the Texas defense is gassed, and Arizona State could do whatever the heck they wanted to with them. And so that's really why I think the Arizona State offense found so much success. It's just they held onto the ball. They did what they needed to do to keep Texas tired and keep that defense on their heels. I think on the other side of the field, I think there's this weird mix where there's days where the Texas running game is going well and they can hit that outside zone and things are going well. The offensive line is communicating well and really doing what they need to do. And then, like we saw against Arizona State late in that game, they just weren't. They weren't creating seams. The running backs weren't able to find any sort of running room, any sort of space. They weren't able to make themselves small in the hole. And Arizona State pounced on it. And so that's when Texas can't get the running game going, when they can't have access to the play action, the offense struggles. And I think, I'm looking not to spin it too far ahead, but I am curious, let's say, to see how it works on against Ohio State, because it is the most talented team I've played all year. So we'll see how that turns out.
I'm going to get out of the way because people can hear me talk all the time. Anytime I want to, I just jump on here and start talking. So I would love to hear from you two so you guys can go back and forth in regards to questions about the Buckeyes and the Horns. It's all yours, Steve.
Well, yes. And Gerald, great talking to you. Quinn Ewers, obviously, going way back, was at Ohio State for a cup of coffee before he went to Texas. And looks like he's had a pretty good 3-year run to do what they did last year and kind of a breakthrough season, win the Big 12 and get to the playoff. And then obviously this year, only 2 losses to Georgia. And I know he was banged up a little bit earlier in the season, but for Ohio State fans who really haven't spent a lot of time watching Quinn the last 3 years. Like what's his development been like, and is he really scratching the surface of where he's capable, or is he playing maybe the best football right now?
It's such a tough thing to evaluate, right? Because a guy comes in to the school as the top-rated quarterback recruit of all time, and you expect, Trevor Lawrence out the gate, right? If you remember that a few years back, how good he was when he got to Clemson. And Quinn just hasn't been that. He's not been healthy since he got there. He got injured in that Alabama game. He had a shoulder injury last year. He had an oblique injury this year, now the ankle injury as well. And so it's hard for me to evaluate because this is like apocrypha or an anathema amongst Texas fans, but like he has as many Big 12 championships as Colt McCoy and Vince Young, right? He's been in the college football playoff twice, right? There are those things that like there's the perspective we have to have that Quinn Ewers statistically and as far as what he's done on the field is in the same conversation as two of the greatest that Texas fans have ever seen do it, right? He's number 3 behind Colt McCoy and Major Applewhite on a lot of the career statistics, right? So like when we think about through that lens, like Quinn Ewers has done a really good job being what Texas needed in this era. But is he the guy that we expected him to be when there was all of the recruiting kerfuffle when I was watching and texting friends that lived in Lubbock? Hey, is Quinn still there? What's going on? Has he been to Austin yet? That's not the expectation that he's lived up to, but you see flashes of it, which I think is the most frustrating part. He took over at the fourth quarter in overtime. After he threw that interception, he was like 10 of 11 for 180-something yards and 2 touchdowns, right? Like the dude can turn it on, but we haven't seen the consistent level of that throughout games. He hasn't put together 4 good quarters. Maybe the Alabama game last year is probably the closest we've seen to that. So I think that's probably from a Texas fan's perspective, the most frustrating part is you see flashes of excellence from Quinn Ewers. You see that, this is what scouts saw. This is what made him a perfect rated quarterback coming out of high school, but we just don't see it all the time.
Mm-hmm. The 2 running backs, Wisner and Blue, how do they kind of complement one another?
Yeah, it's a very different running style. Jaden Blue is your kind of one cut and go. If you go back and watch the first round game against Clemson, that's probably the best example of his skill set. He's got a, I call like faster than geometry. Right? There's a guy that has a pretty decent angle and he can just outrun it. And that's his big deal. He struggles to hold on to the ball sometimes. Multiple times this year, they made him walk around campus holding a football just to make sure he didn't, like old school stuff, right? Contravian Wisner is a guy who's more your classic, I'm just going to stick my nose in there in the zone scheme and see what pops out. And he has been great. I love Trey Wisner. He is a guy who, when he came to Texas, he was a 3-star kid, had shifted around and really was unable to find his footing in high school. And now he's kind of come in and had to step up and turn into a 1,000-yard back when Texas needed it. So his ability to get the tough yards shows up sometimes, but obviously, it would be, I think Texas fans would be happier if CJ Baxter hadn't gotten hurt in preseason camp. I'll just probably say it like that.
Yeah. Back on quarterback for a second, Arch Manning, is it possible that we'll see him in as a change-up quarterback at times? I know that they've used him and maybe even in instances where yours was struggling a little bit. Do they ever still put him out there, I guess?
It has been less frequent than when they first did it. I think when Quinn was first coming back from the injury, it was more frequent. But I think now that he's gotten more confident with himself, and now that massive ankle brace he has on, that he's comfortable with it, I think we're going to see less of him. And I think part of the problem is, and this is, again, this is one of those things that we have to have some nuance with, right? Arch Manning, incredible quarterback, still a redshirt freshman, right? So he still needs some time processing pass coverages, reading the defense. So it's really been that Arch package has been mostly of a like zone read kind of, am I going to keep it or am I going to hand it off to the running back? There's not been a ton of wrinkles and teams have kind of seen that. And so I think until they throw a pass in there, we're not going to see a ton or as much as we have or much as fans maybe want to see.
Yeah. The receiving group looks very deep to me. 9 different people have caught touchdown passes. 8 different people have 20 catches or more. And of course, that includes Blue and Wisner, the 2 running backs. But what's your thought about the receiving group? Ohio State secondary has played really well the last 3 games in particular, had some penalties and some big plays against them prior to that, but they have really played much better here the last 3 games. Are they good enough, you feel, to challenge this OSU secondary?
Yeah, this is the thing that terrifies me is probably not the right word because it's a football game. But like, I haven't done the research yet. I was gonna work on it this afternoon. But Texas and Steve Sarkisian have struggled against Jim Knowles' defenses. That 3 high safety look is just something that I don't know whether it's they can't take the top off and so they're unable to get the run game going underneath. I'm not sure what it is. But like the pass game against specifically like Jim Knowles when he was at Oklahoma State, it was a struggle for Steve Sarkisian in that game. Now there are some talent differences there, but the wide receivers that Texas has, Isaiah Bond has been gimpy. He had an ankle injury he tried to come back from too early, so he hasn't really been as effective at the pass game as folks wanted him to be. Matthew Golden has really emerged in the last couple of games as kind of the Mr. Big Play guy. He was on the receiving end of that game extending 4th and 13 overtime touchdown reception. He was the guy who kind of found space behind the safety and did that. And then really Gunnar Helm is the other name to really watch in this group. The tight end, he was again another 3-star guy. They identified him late in the cycle, brought him in, developed the heck out of him. Jeff Banks did a really good job getting him ready to play, and he's become one of the better tight ends in the country. He and Quinn Ewers have a really good rapport. They do really a good job, and Ewers knows how to throw a ball that Gunnar Helm likes to catch, especially in the end zone. Helm's got a pretty decent catch radius, and so he can put it in some spots where if Gunner's hands don't get on it, it's going out of bounds, it's going out the back of the end zone, that type of thing. So those are probably the names to watch in this game as far as the wide receivers.
Yep. Offensive line, OSU had 8 sacks against Oregon. Is the Texas offensive line, is this one of the better offensive lines that they've had? And how have they done in terms of protecting the quarterbacks, I guess?
It's a weird conversation to have. You have to talk about Georgia and then everybody else. I think it's the two ways you have to talk about this, right? Because Georgia had their way with this front. Due to some injuries, due to some struggles, Georgia did some things defensively in that first game that Texas just hadn't seen before and kind of caught them slipping. Against most other teams, Texas has been pretty solid. Now, pending the health of Cam Williams, the right tackle, who's probably got an NFL future, maybe not this offseason, but next offseason. That's one to watch when the injury report comes out. Is Cam Williams going to be healthy? And Kelvin Banks is Kelvin Banks. There's a reason why Oregon wanted him as bad as they did. There's a reason why I'm really glad Mario Cristobal left Oregon when he did. He's been great. Have experienced guys on the interior at center and guard. Texas has been solid in the offensive line. Again, outside of those 2 games against Georgia, especially protecting the quarterback. But they're injured. So Cam Williams' health is the one I really want to keep an eye on. Jake Majors is good. They said he would have gone back in the Clemson game after they didn't release what it was, but I would say it was a concussion 99% of the time, like the way his body looked when it went down after that blindside hit. So they said he's ready to go. He could have gone back in against Clemson. So Cam Williams' health is a big one to watch.
Yeah, the only other thing I would ask about is defensively. We saw in the Rose Bowl what Ohio State was able to exploit when Will Howard has time. He's become somewhat of a big play type guy, getting the ball to Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka in particular, and a few others. Just how does Texas match up on the outside on the perimeter? I know they had the Jim Thorpe Award winner, but are they 3, 4, 5 deep there in the secondary? And can they keep Ohio State from making those big plays?
I think asking them to completely shut down a wide receiving core in a passing game that explosive is like an unfair expectation of any defensive secondary. It's just not going to happen. There's too much talent, too much speed, too much explosiveness there. Can they slow them down? Maybe, right? Jahdae Barron has been incredible, obviously Thorpe Award winner. Jaden Gilbo, who's kind of been his understudy at nickel for a couple of years, and they play with a little positional versatility between those two. Manny Muhammad at corner is probably the one to watch. He was incredible last year as a freshman. He's gotten picked on a couple of times. A lot of the big passes you saw against Clemson were to Manny's side of the field. So I'm really again, that's the matchup to watch. The back end has been great. Michael Taff, former walk-on, has been great as a center fielder. Andrew Makuba, the guy who came up with the interception to end the game against Arizona State, has been Mr. Like when Texas needs a big play in the secondary, he's the one that does it. He's part of the reason why Georgia doesn't have their quarterbacks in this one, or didn't have a healthy quarterback a couple weeks ago. So they're good, but again, this is a team with a 90%, I think, blue chip ratio. And a lot of that is at the offensive skill position, right? There's no 2 ways around that. And frankly, Will Howard likes playing against Texas. He put up like 304, I think, in Austin last year. Part of the reason why they were able to take that game to overtime and almost come away with a win in that game. So it's going to be interesting to watch and see how he exploits a team that he did a good job of it last year with lesser talent.
Yeah. You get to the Final Four in this format, you haven't lucked your way into anything. You had, these teams all had to go out and win 2 games to get to this point, and it kind of debunked the idea that, winning your conference championship and getting a bye was this huge advantage. Now everybody's on equal footing. Everybody's played 2 games, and nobody's gotten here by accident. Well, Penn State, SMU, and Boise State. They
played a game and a half, I guess.
Yeah, we could say that they kind of lucked their way into the Final Four, but otherwise, everybody else had to put their cards on the table and actually go out and win football games. So, I'll throw it open if you have anything that you want to ask about Ohio State. But I just think we've got 4 really great teams here, and however it turns out, as I said earlier, we're going to have an outstanding national championship matchup. And, I'm excited to see how it all plays out. But I'll throw it open to anything that you guys have about Ohio State or about the matchup in general.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in. I think my biggest question is like the difference we see what Ohio State is doing now versus kind of the middle of the season and even, in the Michigan game where the offense struggled. Like, what has been the big difference? We had those tight games. The Penn State game was pretty tight in the middle of the season. The Nebraska game was tighter than it probably should have been. They had that explosion versus Purdue and things start to step up. Like, what's been this next gear that they found in the playoffs that they're just blowing teams off the field?
Well, obviously the offensive line's gone through a lot of changes, and they lost Josh Simmons, the left tackle, in the Oregon game. Then Seth McLaughlin was lost for the season. Prior to the Indiana game, he suffered an Achilles injury, non-contact injury in practice, took a bad step or something on the field turf. And that's not the first time that's happened at Ohio State. It happened to one of the running backs, I want to say Master Teague, maybe 3 or 4 years ago as well. So this is something that has kind of plagued Ohio State a little bit. I don't know if it's a field turf issue or exactly what it is, but at any rate, they had to kind of regroup on the offensive line, and that led to some inconsistency at times. And they finally have settled on what seems to be the best offensive line group that they can put out there. And that is Donovan Jackson, who was the guard on the left side, playing left tackle, Austin Siereveld and Luke Montgomery alternating at left guard. It's very unorthodox, but on the 3rd or 4th series, they put Luke Montgomery in the game, number 51, and he replaces Siereveld. Carson Hinsman started last season. He was on the bench for the first 9 games this season when Seth McLaughlin, who came in from Alabama, started at center. And Hinsman originally got in at guard, and then obviously when McLaughlin got hurt, they put him over to center. And then you got Tegra Shabola. He's just a big body guy at right guard, and right tackle is Josh Fryer, a guy who's really kind of a self-made guy. He worked really hard in the offseason to improve his agility and his strength and everything. And he's become a very good player for them over at right tackle. So, you look at it, it shouldn't be as good as it is, but the offensive line has come together. They've been together for about 3 games now. They pass protected outstanding. I want to say Michigan, Tennessee, and Texas, no sacks in those 3 games, or if there was 1 sack against Michigan, that was it. So, they have played outstanding in terms of pass protection. The run game has not been, maybe what you'd think it should be or would be. Had Simmons and McLaughlin been healthy, I think they'd continue to maul people. But having said that, Henderson and the other back, Quinshon Judkins, the transfer from Ole Miss, they are both in position to go over the 1,000-yard mark in this game. I think they're both about 60 or 70 yards short of 1,000, and that would be a great accomplishment to have 2 guys go over 1,000 in a season. So, it's kind of in a nutshell. They decided after Michigan, where they tried to put a square peg in a round hole, trying to run the ball against the defensive tackles from Michigan, that they were going to go up top and throw the ball as much as they could. And it's paid huge dividends because Tennessee and Oregon really were no match for them throwing the football. So Howard over 300 yards in both games, only just one interception. And that was a bad luck play against Tennessee. The ball went off Jeremiah Smith's hand when he was being interfered with in the end zone, and it went right to the Tennessee linebacker, and he made the interception. So, you think about it, everything's clicked pretty well for them. 42 points in the first game against Tennessee, 41 points against Oregon. And, they're hitting on all cylinders at the right time, even with kind of a patchwork offensive line.
It's amazing how that works out sometimes. I think my other first big question on the offense is you mentioned it, but what I was driving and had to listen to that Michigan game. But just what was the thought behind it? I'm sure somebody has asked Chip Kelly what he saw in Michigan, that he tried to kind of create that game plan. It just seemed like they went away from everything that worked. And is it just a case that Texas fans see with Sark all the time, where one of the best offensive minds in the country just kind of overthinks things? What was the thought behind that, if we have any insight into it?
Before Steve goes, I think Steve scratching his head tells you all you need to know about what the answer should be there. I think that's everything.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knows what Chip Kelly was thinking that day. It was a complex situation. The first quarter and a half, they were playing pretty good, but then Will Howard went on a scramble, and I think Michigan scrambled him a little bit. He went to the tent, and there were a couple TV timeouts in there while this all happened, and he ended up only missing one play. And he got back on the field, and he said he was fine. The medical personnel said he was fine, was not concussed, but he was obviously not the same quarterback, because after the injury or after the hit, he was only 13 of 25 after that. He's been a 70% passer, most of the time. So they couldn't do things in the passing game like they had hoped. And Michigan took away the run game. So they were going 3 and out and not generating any offense. Jack Sawyer, he had an interception in that game to stop a touchdown. Caleb Downs had an interception in that game to give him possession at the 15-yard line, and they ended up missing a field goal and didn't even score as a result of it. They missed 2 short field goals, and Howard threw 2 interceptions, very uncharacteristic, and they weren't able to take advantage of the passing game. Had no running game to speak of in that game. So, yeah, it was a perfect storm of they just ran into the wrong team at the wrong time, and the quarterback, to my way of thinking, he wasn't right. And instead of subbing Devin Brown or somebody else in there to finish the game, they had Howard try and gut it out, and it didn't work, unfortunately, for Ohio State that day. But the 2 games since then, everything's kind of clicked together. So
it just seems like such a weird fly in the ointment situation of what's been a really solid offensive year. So I had to ask the question when I had the opportunity. So I think flipping to the other side, and again, Texas has seen Jim Knowles a couple of times from his time in Stillwater. So how have teams, if they have really, found success attacking that defense? And specifically, if Texas was able to dial up the right game plan to do it, what would that look like, or what have teams done this year?
Well, I think you got to protect the quarterback. That's the first thing. Mm-hmm. I think you can't give up negative plays. Ohio State's not a big interception or turnover team. They don't intercept the passes very often, but they will create negative plays. And I think you've got to be really good up front with your run blocking. I think you've got to create and get to the second level, because the linebacker, Cody Simon, really came on this year and had perhaps his best year, no doubt his best year as an Ohio State player. Sonny Styles, the other linebacker, is a guy who moved from safety last year, and he's a tremendous athletic specimen. And at the beginning of the year, he was kind of a fish out of water playing linebacker, but he is now really kind of come on here down the stretch and played some good games as well. And of course, then you got the All-American safety Caleb Downs coming down and filling as well. If those two guys don't make the play, he's usually right there to make the play as well in the run game. And so there've been at times, some plays that have gotten out against Ohio State. And again, I just think it comes back to pass protection up front and having a good scheme run wise and executing it against this team. The four starters on the defensive line are all seniors. They've all started probably between 25 and 40 games. So they are all veteran players. And, Tyke Williams, one of the best defensive tackles around. And right now, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, who are both 5 stars coming out of high school, are playing up to that level in terms of impact on the game. They gave Cody Simon the defensive player of the game for the Rose Bowl, but it very easily could have been Jack Sawyer. He had 2 sacks and 3 pass breakups. And those pass breakups are huge. That makes 2nd and 10, now 3rd and 10, so, those are almost like a sack sometimes, those pass breakups, because instead of picking up 10 or 15 yards, if the pass goes through, you get 0. So, to me, he has been worth his weight in gold here the last 2 or 3 games. Had the big interception on the goal line against Michigan. They didn't get anything out of it, obviously. But, again, these are guys that have played a lot of football on the defensive side, and they are hungry. They still don't have a trophy or anything to really show for it in their entire 4-year period at Ohio State. They won a couple Rose Bowls, but that's the funny thing. We were talking with Mark before you came on. You have this great showing in the Rose Bowl, which ordinarily is the end of the season for an Ohio State or a Big Ten team, and it's they're halfway there in the playoff. There's it was a really funny scene in the corridor outside the locker room. Everybody took their time getting back there, and they're just excited and whatever. And about 5 minutes after everybody was back there, a couple of the assistant coaches noticed that some of the players were still on the field, and they ran out there like, "Hey, we got to go. We got to go. Come on. We got to go." Like, the players leaving in 5 minutes. I think it dawned on them that, we've got to go back to Columbus and start work on this, at 4 a.m. when we get back. So, the sooner we get back, the better. So, they celebrated the game for about 20 minutes and it was on to the next one. So, and I'm sure Texas was the same way. So, it just, we're in uncharted territory. Ohio State was in uncharted territory in the first 14 playoff when they and Oregon won the semifinal games, and then they were the only 2 teams left playing 10 days later on January the 10th for the championship. We're going on that 10-day cycle again to this game, and then the 2 winners of these games coming up will go one more 10-day cycle, and I think this will have ramifications on these teams for next year, no doubt, between guys getting banged up and guys slowly getting, back into the fold for 2025, after offseason surgeries and whatever. But, I guess for now, just enjoy the ride because both these teams are on a great ride right now.
Absolutely.
Hey, Steve, just to extend on something, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, 2 aspects of Jim Knowles' performance at Ohio State that I would say would be, number one, he's proven to be more adaptable than he was early on. He was very stubborn in what he wanted to do, and he seems to be adapting to the talent on the field and not just sticking with his scheme and changing some things from game to game, number one. Number two, if you look at his defensive performance at Oklahoma State, and we looked at this at the time that he was hired, the end results those last couple of years, of course, that last team went to the Big 12 championship game and came that close to a playoff bid and was one of the best defenses in the country, that it took them a while to get there. They actually regressed a little bit, Oklahoma State defensively in the rankings when he first got there, and it took them a while to take hold. I think that the defense was difficult for some people to take on, and maybe that's happened at Ohio State as well, that it's taken some time for the players to really adapt and really understand and be able to instinctually operate in his scheme.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head here. I mean, you go back to his first year, they play Michigan, and Michigan has all those big chunk plays for touchdowns, and that wasn't acceptable, obviously, in 2022. 2023, they were pretty much lights out all season long and really bought into his scheme, and it was the offense that, kind of was the thing holding this team up from being a great team. And then obviously, this year they play Oregon. They gave up 8 plays of 25 yards or longer, 6 pass plays and 2 run plays, including a 27-yard run by the quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, for a touchdown in the fourth quarter that kind of helped Oregon grab control of the game, and they won the game 32-31, obviously. And I think they had an open week after that, so they had 2 full weeks to kind of get under the hood and tinker. And the results since then have been just nothing short of fabulous. The opponents have averaged less than 300 yards. They were averaging 11 points until they gave up, 21 this past week. So that average in the last 8 games is probably up to 13 or 14 points now. But it's still, you give up 14 points in college football, you got to feel pretty good about winning the game, particularly with the offense on the other side. So I think it's been more of a common sense approach that we don't have to take chances. We can keep the ball in front of us and live to play another day, and then play great defense in the red zone and make people settle for field goals. That's kind of been the MO, I think, for this team. I mean, for the weeks after they played Oregon, Penn State, a team that's in the Final Four, scored 13 points against Ohio State and only 2 field goals on offense. The touchdown was a pick-6 interception by their defense. So their offense is in the Final Four and didn't score a touchdown in that game against Ohio State. So that'll give you maybe a little bit of a nutshell of what this defense is capable of.
To extend on a question that was left in the chat, and I'll add my spin to it because I've got a few different directions to go here. It was mentioned, Gerald, about the Texas passing game to the running back position, and I believe Weissner and Blue are 1-2 in the SEC in running back receptions. So they obviously love to go to those guys. This is maybe a different challenge for the Buckeyes in regards to covering backs out of the backfield. And Steve mentioned the outstanding play of Cody Simon in the Rose Bowl, but in recent weeks. So that could be a key matchup, how well the Buckeyes pick up those backs out of the backfield.
Yeah, Sark loves a wheel route. Like, who doesn't love a wheel route? They're so much fun, especially with the speed that Texas has with Jaden Blue at running back. And there are times where the Texas run game has struggled, and so they use those kind of quick passes, quick outs, kind of in the flats to the running backs to try to get something going and kind of supplement the run game. That's something that Sark is kind of just part and parcel of his offense. So they've really gone to that. Texas was blessed, I think is the right way to say it. Bijan Robinson, who's one of the better pass catching running backs we've seen in the last probably 5 or 10 years. And that's just become a part of what Sark likes to do, is get those running backs in space, take advantage of some of the athleticism they've got, and help supplement, kind of ease the box a little bit, so that outside zone that they like to run can flourish.
Yeah, I think that you make a good point. I think running backs catching the ball out of the backfield, I don't think there's been a lot of that against Ohio State this year. I'd have to look it up and see if anybody really exploited that. They were not giving up any passing touchdowns, I think, until Oregon had at least one, maybe 2 in that game, the Rose Bowl. So that's something that Ohio State's defense really had been clamped down on, was scoring passes. So we'll see if Texas can take advantage of some things like that here in the Cotton Bowl. I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously, Gerald, not sure, are you based in Austin or Dallas or which?
San Antonio.
San Antonio. Yeah, I love San Antonio. I've been there for NCAA basketball and the Alamo Bowl 20 years ago. But, to me, it looks like Texas is going to have the advantage in the stadium, probably 2-1. And, It's obvious, with it being in Texas, and Ohio State will travel and they'll have a few people there. But I think Texas is going to have the fan advantage. And to me, inside, how does Ohio State handle the noise? How does Ohio State offense avoid those pre-snap penalties, jumping off sides and false starts and these kind of things? So that's going to be, I think, an integral part of this game.
Yeah, there was this weird movement this last couple of weeks of Texas fans like skipping over the Peach Bowl, just like, okay, we're just going to skip that and prepare for Dallas. Getting to Atlanta is not cheap, and doing it twice in a month is real expensive. So, Texas fans were like, we're just going to opt out, which turned out to be a bad decision, but it is what it is, right? Glad they didn't get caught counting their chickens. We'll say it like that.
Yeah, it's going to be to me, it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think that it's going to be a game where the crowd is hot and hang on every play. And, I've enjoyed my time down there. The Missouri game, obviously, last year was not a good game for Ohio State in any way, shape, or form, playing with their backup quarterback and some other guys, Marvin Harrison Jr. not playing. Some other guys sat out as well. But, you look at it that they'll have all hands on deck. They're pretty healthy other than the two offensive linemen, and should be in really good shape for this game. And, Jeremiah Smith, as long as they got Jeremiah Smith, they got a chance. In my mind, he makes the hard catch look really easy, and he's obliterated a lot of records in the OSU record book already. And we'll see if he can do the same this week with the Cotton Bowl.
It's amazing how smart coaches look when they have players like Jeremiah Smith, right? It's really easy to look smart when you have those guys.
It is, no doubt.
Gerald, you mentioned the game that Will Howard had against Texas last year. I remember that one. And if I'm not mistaken, Texas was up by like 17 points in that game. And Kansas State came back to tie it and lost in overtime. Will Howard, you mentioned, over 300 yards passing. But this Texas secondary, if I'm not mistaken, considerably better than that one.
Yeah, they had some addition by subtraction, which sounds like a terrible thing to say, but they had some folks transfer out that maybe weren't up to the task. They had some guys transfer in to replace them. Andrew Makuba is the guy from Clemson that I really point to as like the big difference maker on the back end for Texas. This is a market improvement from, I think, last year's secondary. That was still pretty solid. Will Howard had his way with the secondary last year. And so the secondary is better. Jahdae Barron's been better. Manny Muhammad, like I said earlier in the live stream, is the one to really watch. He's had some really good weeks where it's like Muhammad Island over there on the left side of the field, but Clemson saw something against him that they really liked and picked him apart a bit. He's had some weird decisions he's made in pass coverage. The Cam Scatterbo passing touchdown, he took a bad line on the receiver. He could have been in spot to knock it down, but just didn't do it, and then kind of gave up on the play afterwards. It's really weird. So it's been an interesting journey to watch, we'll say.
I tend to lean into the historic side of these games, and I love to look at the history, love to look at the matchups, love to look at how they compare, and then how this frames itself up historically. And obviously what's happened in the past has zero impact on this game coming up. Texas has won 2 of 3 games, and very, very marquee games for their time. 2005, Vince Young obviously throws the touchdown pass in the last 30 or 40 seconds to win the game, a game Ohio State looked to have in control in Columbus. Just a great game between 2 really good teams. And obviously Texas propelled on to a national championship. And then the Buckeyes get the revenge in Austin the next year. It's another top 5 matchup. And then we go forward just a few years. So for 2 blue bloods that have been playing football forever, they played 3 times in the span of like 4 years. But that was a great Fiesta Bowl that Beanie Wells had a remarkable first half, and Texas came back and scored with like 12 seconds left in the game to win. So, Gerald, my question for you would be, how do Texas or the Texas contingent, do they have any kind of thoughts about Ohio State other than just being another blue blood? Any animosity, hatred, vitriol there, or any type of thoughts?
Not necessarily, and not in like a bad way, but like there is no reason, especially the trajectories these 2 programs have been on for the last 15 years or so, to have nothing but respect for Ohio State. Like, they've been one of the premier recruiting and on-field performance teams in Texas. Has been kind of for a program that's been playing since the 1800s. They've been kind of a modern era upstart, for lack of a better term, where Texas really trying to get things back together and seems to have them moving in the right direction. I was in Austin when that first game in Columbus happened. I was actually at work and just walked off the register and celebrated with some folks in the street because nobody was coming into the ice cream shop that night. Quan Cosby diving in the end zone in that Fiesta Bowl, one of my favorite moments of all time. I have it. It was a background on my computer for several years because it was just such a cool moment. But yeah, there's no animosity. There's not a hatred. Like, this is what the expanded college football playoff, one of the things it was meant to do was give you these helmet games, right? Give you these games where it's Notre Dame and Penn State, two of the historic programs in the country, Texas and Ohio State, two of the most historic teams in the country. Like, this is freaking cool. There's no two ways around it. I think Texas fans are excited. We're glad it's in Dallas, that's for sure. Short road trip can kind of pack Jerry World as much as they can. So it's an exciting matchup.
Steve, any thoughts along those lines of the historical aspect of this one?
Yeah, you think about it. These two teams are supposed to play in the first game. I think it's August 30th or 30, probably the 30th or 31st this coming year. First game in Columbus, and the teams will look dramatically different. Ohio State will certainly be only 7 starters probably coming back off this team because a lot of seniors, obviously, and a new quarterback, certainly. So, in one regard, we're getting a preview of an important game for 2025. But, as of right now, there's no more important game than playing in a semifinal to get to the national championship. And those were 3 great games that the teams played previously. Obviously, Vince Young led a drive for the ages to lead Texas to that win. And was it Lima
Swede?
Swede, yes, caught the touchdown. I was standing down in that corner, and he landed on his back just inside the line there in the corner of the end zone in what would be the north end zone at Ohio State. And I was standing right there when it happened, and it went to replay. And I said, they don't have to replay it. I was standing right there. And he was down in bounds, no question about it. And
I wonder who the DB was that was draped all over him. I'll have to look up that picture.
Yeah, I don't want to call that offhand.
It was somebody big time.
Yeah, all the names kind of come and go. It could have been Malcolm Jenkins potentially, but he would have only been a freshman. I'd have to think on that 05 team who it could have been.
20 years is a long time. Hard to think back.
The guys come and go, so much that it is kind of hard to keep it all straight. Then 06, I was down there in Austin. What an amazing environment for a game, and looking forward to going back there in 2026 when OSU would go down there. But just incredible environment. And Troy Smith put on a show that day, as did Ted Ginn Jr., 24-7. And Ohio State's defense, that was when, Colt was just kind of getting going, I think.
Yeah.
And, wasn't quite Colt yet. But he certainly was Colt the next time around when they played. He was the MVP of the game. And it's really funny. They were celebrating in the locker room, and it was an open locker room. When I was done with OSU, I went over to the Texas locker room, and like the game trophy and his jersey were sitting in his locker, and everybody was like gone off, celebrating or somewhere. I could have walked right in and taken his game jersey and the trophy and walked right out of the locker room with it. But I was like, well, they probably would never invite me back if I did something like that. So, but yeah, that was a heck of a game. Ohio State had the chance in that game if I think Heron went in for a touchdown and to give them like a 4-point lead or something. Whereas if he had just, fallen down at the 1 and they'd taken the time down, they could have kicked a field goal and won the game by a point, I think, was the way it shook out. But my math could be a little fuzzy one way or the other, but they didn't manage that situation maybe the way that they should have in hindsight. And Terrell Pryor was playing obviously a quarterback for OSU. And it was that was a hell of a game out there in Arizona. That spaceship in Arizona is Ohio State's house of horrors. When you think about the Florida game, that Texas game, Clemson game with Deshaun Watson, and then the Clemson game in 19 with the interception in the end zone. That's not been Ohio State's favorite place to go for postseason, no doubt.
I knew that touchdown by Lima Snead was against one of my favorite Buckeyes. Yes, Nate Sally.
Nate Spider Sally. Yeah. How about that?
All right, guys, we appreciate you being here. Folks in the chat, appreciate you being here. Please hit the like button and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. Gerald, you've got the show tonight, correct, on the Texas channel?
Yep, it'll be 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 Central. All
right. Anything else that you've got going on that we need to know about?
Yeah, if you're looking for some specific Texas coverage, check us out. The Longhorn Republic, a longtime friend, journalism school friend, and I host that. We put out two shows a week, Tuesday and Thursday. Thursday will be our preview show for the game. So if you want some more of what we got to say, come check us out there, anywhere you find podcasts.
All right. So that's the Texas show tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time on the Texas channel, and it's Longhorn Republic. And those two shows are when? Tuesday and Thursday?
Tuesday and Thursday.
Perfect. Steve, what's going on this week? I know you got some travel plans. I don't know where you're headed, but maybe you can fill us in.
Yeah, Wednesday afternoon, I'm headed to Dallas. What's great about Dallas from Columbus is it's a competitive market. You've got American flies direct in there and Southwest flies direct in there. So they can't gouge you too badly on the airfare to get there. So anybody from Columbus who wants to go should be able to go. It's about finding tickets. I don't know about that. But at any rate, I've always enjoyed my time down in Dallas. Obviously, that's where Ohio State beat Oregon to win the national championship. They beat USC there a few years ago as well. Lost to Missouri last year. And now they're back there this year, 1 year later, to play the home team, to play Texas. And it should be quite a showing. I think they're in the Cotton Bowl. The Ohio State team will arrive Wednesday night. We'll have coverage of their arrival on Wednesday. On a Thursday, we'll have the head coach's press conference with Steve Sarkisian and Ryan Day. And then obviously the game Friday night, I think 7:30 on ESPN, and then back to Columbus on Saturday. So it's a whirlwind trip. We don't get those week-long bowl trips anymore, but the trip to California was awesome. Was out there 4 nights and, had my fill of Los Angeles for a while, and nothing, no real bad travel stories to speak of. Everything worked out getting out and back. And, of course, really bad snowstorm has hit Ohio. We got about 3 or 4 inches of snow overnight. And here in Columbus, that's about a whole winter's worth of snow in one day. And so we'll see if we can dig out of that and get on the road on Wednesday.
Yakov, thank you so much for the super chat. I really thought, Yakov, we were friends. Ohio State, Texas playing 43 years to the day of Montana to Clark, making quite the connection there. I don't know what the crossover is there, but I believe Yakov is telling me that because he knows that was one of the worst losses in the history of my being a sports fan, was my beloved Cowboys of the time, folks. I'm not a Cowboys fan now. Have not been for forever. I'm guessing Gerald is.
I grew up a Dolphins fan. My dad moved to the country when they went undefeated. So immigrant, he was like, yeah, I'm going to cheer for the best team in the league. So he cursed.
This was one of the worst days of my life, the NFC Championship game that year. All right, we'll not get into that, but Yakov, thank you for the super chat. Steve, safe travels. Appreciate you being here.
Hopefully next week's show we're recapping a Ohio State win and looking forward to a national championship game against Penn State, a team Ohio State has dominated in the Franklin year. I think 1-10 Franklin's record against Ohio State, or Notre Dame. You have to be like 95 years old to remember when Notre Dame last beat Ohio State, and Ohio State's won all of the meetings in the modern era. It'd be six games, 4 in the regular season and 2 bowl games. Ohio State's beaten up on Notre Dame, so they've won 6 in a row over Notre Dame and 7 or 8 in a row over Penn State. So if Ohio State can clear this hurdle with Texas, Buckeyes got to be feeling pretty good about hoisting the big one the following week. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
Gerald, thank you so much for showing up, giving us the Texas perspective. We appreciate it.
Outstanding stuff, Gerald. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Anytime.
All right, folks, we'll see you back here next, most likely next Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, but you know the deal. Please subscribe, hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. Sometimes the schedules have to change. Enjoy the playoff games.